Alrighty, Diesel Weezy People News. One more time at it. I'm not an attorney and I give them legal advice. Educational purposes only. Alright, do your own research. Anything I say to do is just my commentary and my opinions. Okay? So just take everything with a grain of salt. I'm learning just as well as everybody else is out there. Okay? Never look straight forward. Always look around you to be able to protect yourself by any means necessary. Arm yourself with knowledge. Use that Second Amendment, people. Okay? It never said to have weapons. It just said be armed. Alright? And when you're in a battle, whether it's on paper, your paperwork is your weapon. So even if it does say weapons, it says arm. This right here is an arm. Alright? That's the reason why you're going in court. You can also say, I am arm length. Right? You're not in battle. Alright. Again, this is for Pro Se versus Court. If you want to check out his video without me doing my opinions. In fact, it's a lot easier if you do so. As for my education, that's the reason why I record these, so I can go back and research my commentary as well as theirs, so I can know what my thought process before and here and in the future. Okay, but let's check it out. Proceed forward.
Conduct, and Canon 2A further elaborates on this duty, stating as follows. Canon 2, avoiding impropriety and the appearance of impropriety in all the judge's activities. A judge shall comply with the law and should act at all times in a manner that promotes public confidence in the integrity and impartiality of the judiciary. Yeah, fat living chance of that.
That literally is the number one they break. Just saying.
This rule emphasizes the importance of judges maintaining their objectivity and avoiding any actions that might create the appearance of bias or impropriety. In practice, this fiduciary duty manifests in several ways. Impartiality. Judges must remain neutral and unbiased in their decisions, avoiding any actions that might favor one party over another. Disclosure. Judges are required to disclose any potential conflicts of interest or biases that might affect their ability to impartially decide a case. Fairness. Judges must ensure that all parties are treated equally and given a fair opportunity to present their cases. Transparency. Judges must maintain transparency in their decision-making processes, providing clear and concise explanations for their rulings, which they never ever do, by the way. While the canons of judicial ethics do not in themselves create a cause of action, they are illustrative of the wrongdoing by defendant. Duty not lightly created. Courts have recognized that A, fiduciary duty is the highest duty recognized by law. A fiduciary duty is the highest duty recognized by law. Accordingly, it is not lightly created. The laws passed by the Texas legislature are without substance, absent a fair and honest judiciary. The ultimate trust of the public is placed in our judges to fairly and honestly adjudicate the rights of the litigants before it. Judges must avoid impropriety and the appearance of impropriety in all the judges' activities as stipulated by Texas Code of Judicial Conduct at Canon 2, which reads as follows. We already read those. The elements of a breach of fiduciary duty. The courts in First United Pentecostal Church of Beaumont versus Parker specified the elements for a claim of breach of fiduciary duty as follows. Generally, the elements of a claim for breach of fiduciary duty are 1. The existence of a fiduciary duty, 2. Breach of the duty, 3. Causation, and 4. Damages. CEGERI Consulting Engineers Incorporated versus Swinia. Okay. A judge has a duty to ensure that a litigant's constitutional and statutory rights are protected and respected throughout the litigation process. This includes ensuring that a litigant has access to the courts, is afforded due process, and is treated fairly and impartially. Canon 1. Upholding the integrity, independence of the judiciary. An independent and honorable judiciary is indispensable to justice in our society. A judge should participate in establishing, maintaining, and enforcing high standards of conduct and should personally observe those standards so that the integrity and independence of the judiciary is preserved. The provisions of this code are to be construed and applied to further that objective. Duty of good faith. Defendant, as an agent for the state, owed a duty of loyalty and good faith, strict integrity, accountability, and fair and honest dealing. An agency creates a fiduciary relationship as a matter of law. I don't know. Crim Truck Tractor Company versus Navistar International. Historically, we have recognized that certain relationships gives rise to a fiduciary duty as a matter of law. More recently, we have also categorized certain relationships as special relationships, giving rise to a tort duty of good faith and fair dealing. A constructive trust arises where a conveyance is induced on the agreement of a fiduciary or confidant to hold in trust for a reconveyance or other purpose, where the fiduciary or confidential relationship is one upon which the grantor justifiably can and does rely, and where the agreement is breached. Since the breach of the agreement is an abuse of the confidence, it is not necessary to establish such a trust to show fraud or intent not to perform the agreement when it was made. The tendency of the courts is to construe the term confidence or confidential relationship liberally in favor of the confider and against the confidant, for the purpose of raising a constructive trust in violation of betrayal thereof. Locke versus Thigpen. Okay. A fiduciary owes its principal a high duty of good faith, fair dealing, honest performance, and strict accountability. Fiduciary defined. The courts in Kinsback Tool Company versus Corbett Wallace Corporation define the duty of a fiduciary as follows. Fiduciary relations, words and phrases. Generally speaking, the term fiduciary contemplates fair dealing and good faith rather than legal obligation as the basis of a transaction, and includes the informal relations which exist whenever one party trusts and relies upon another, as well as technical fiduciary relations, and applies to any person who occupies a position of peculiar confidence towards another. Principal and agent fiduciary relations. It is the duty of a fiduciary to deal openly and to make a full disclosure to the party with whom he stands in such relationship, and he must measure his conduct by high equitable standards rather than by the standards required in dealings between ordinary parties. Standards of the finer loyalties. The courts further opined in Johnson versus Peckham, 132 Texas 48, as follows. When persons enter into a fiduciary relations with each each consents as a matter of law to have his conduct towards the other measured by the standards of the finer loyalties exacted by courts of equity. That is a sound rule and should not be whittled down by exceptions. If the existence of strained relations should be suffered to work an exception, then a designing fiduciary could easily bring about such relations to set the stage for a sharp bargain. There is no suggestion in this record that Peckham did that, but mischief would result more often from engrafting exceptions upon the general rule than from a strict adherence thereto. Constructive trust. Upon the swearing to the judicial oath, defendant created a constructive trust as stipulated by the courts. In Locke v. Thigpen, as follows. A constructive trust arises where a conveyance is induced on the agreement of a fiduciary or confidant to hold in trust for a reconveyance or other purpose. We read that already. The utmost candor, rectitude, care, loyalty, and good faith. Defendant, in the instant case, acted with blatant disregard for his or her fiduciary duty toward plaintiff. The court spoke to the duty of the fiduciary in Burdett versus Miller. A fiduciary duty is a duty of an agent to treat his principal with the utmost candor, rectitude, care, loyalty, and good faith. In fact, to treat the principal as well as the agent would treat himself. See also Douglas versus Aztec Petroleum. Breach of fiduciary duty is a tort. Elements of breach of fiduciary duty. The courts have addressed the elements of a breach of fiduciary duty in Jones versus Bloom as follows. The elements of a breach of fiduciary duty are a fiduciary relationship between the plaintiff and defendant. The defendant must have breached its fiduciary duty to the plaintiff, and the defendant's breach must result in injury to the plaintiff or benefit to the plaintiff. A fiduciary relationship may be formal or informal. Fiduciary duties arise as a matter of law in certain formal relationships, including attorney-client and trustee relationships. Plaintiff harmed by breach of fiduciary duty. Plaintiff is a citizen in this republic and thereby has a reasonable expectation of the equal protection of the laws. by refusing to perform a duty solely because the person complained of is a public servant has the effect of breaching the most basic tenets of a republic so elegantly stipulated in the preamble of Texas Government Code 552001, which reads as follows. Under the fundamental philosophy of the American constitutional form of representative government that adheres to the principle that government is the servant, not the master of the people, it is the policy of this state that each person is entitled, unless otherwise expressly, I don't know what the fuck he's putting here. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is why you always read shit Randy writes, and you never, ever, ever take it at face value. Got that? Ever. Okay. Expressly provided by law. I think this is supposed to be a title out here. Okay. That's heading 3. Who the hell knows? Defendant would have it that the people answer to the servant, and only the master can be held to the rule of law. By the refusal of defendant to perform an administrative duty, plaintiff was disenfranchised from plaintiff's constitution in violation of Texas Constitution, Article 1, Section 19, which reads as follows. And again, deprivation of life, liberty, property, etc. by due course of the law. Negligence per se. Negligence per se is a tort concept recognized in Texas whereby the civil courts adopt a legislatively imposed standard of conduct as defining the conduct of a reasonably prudent person. Negligence per se is a tort concept whereby the civil courts adopt the legislative principle or legislatively imposed standard of conduct as defining the conduct of a reasonably prudent person. The unexcused violation of a statute constitutes negligence as a matter of law if such statute was designed to prevent injury to the class of persons to which the injured party belongs. Okay, Section 52 of Article 6701D has been recognized as just such a safety statute since it seeks to prevent property damage and personal injury by prohibiting driving on the left-hand side of the road. Okay. Clearly stated legislative intent. In the instant case, the Texas legislature specifically commanded the magistrate to act in a particular way by Texas Code of Criminal Procedure 15.09 Super. It was the intent of the legislature as evidenced by the clear language of the law that the defendant had no discretion at this point in the process. Statutory violation. Where a public official fails to perform a duty said official is commanded by law to perform, the court must construe that the official acted with deliberate culpable intent per Texas Penal Code Section 6.03, definitions of culpable mental states, right? Or at best was negligent as to his or her duty. Alright, so we gotta fix this crap too now. Okay. Culpable intent or at best was negligent as to his or her duty. Pursuant. Okay. Denial of procedural due process. The failure on the part of the defendant to perform a duty he was statutorily commanded to perform had the effect of denying plaintiff the full and free access to and enjoyment of the due course of the laws of the state of Texas in criminal violation of Penal Code 39.03 Super. Said violation was the proximate cause of plaintiff's injury. The Texas Supreme Court has determined that the procedural due process protect.
So, just in case you're new at it, right? Texas Criminal Code 39, all right, that is for government misconducts. That is the criminal code that you would charge government. Now, you can go with the other ones and all that kind of stuff that they use against us. But you definitely want this particular code to make sure you get it right. Because, retaliation does happen. Okay? So, I just want to bring that up to your attention there.
Provided under the Texas Constitution mirror those provided under the federal Constitution. While the Texas Constitution is textually different in that it refers to due course rather than due process, we regard these terms as without meaningful distinction. Although Texas state courts are not bound by federal due process jurisprudence, we have traditionally followed contemporary federal due process interpretations of procedural due process issues. Now, what they actually do is when they find a federal ruling that they like, because it allows them to override a provision of the Texas Constitution by following the federal version instead of the state-required version, they'll adopt it without question. One of those rulings has to do with the assistance of counsel. See, there's a United States Supreme Court ruling that says that assistance of counsel only applies in cases where you can be sentenced to jail as part of the punishment. The Texas Constitution, even though the federal Constitution says no such thing, that's how the federal courts have ruled the interpretation at the federal level. Well, the Texas Constitution specifically says that you have the right to counsel in all criminal prosecutions, period. Doesn't differentiate between whether or not you can be sentenced to jail. It just says criminal prosecutions. That's what they're bound by, but they didn't follow it. Instead, they went with the federal ruling, and now that's why you don't get a fucking lawyer for Class C fine onlys, because they cannot sentence you to jail for them. Now, let's not even talk about the fact that they put you in jail for many of them after they arrest you for them. There's no lawyer to get you bailed out. There's no lawyer to make your first appearance. There's no lawyer to do a lot of things for you, including your initial probable cause determination hearing. No lawyer for any of that, even though they're required to provide one. So don't believe this bullshit from the Texas courts, because they're full of fucking shit. Importantly, Texas courts interpreting procedural due process claims have a...
Alright, so I wanted to catch that rant and rave right there, because it's true. Again, they're violating our Constitution. And they just keep adding crap in there to use things on purpose with ill will and ill intent to hang you up into jail without your due process. Again, these attorneys and judges stay up all freaking night making this crap up. And then what's sadder than that is all our legislatures that's supposed to represent us is getting legal advice. That is wrong legal advice. And then they end up writing laws that they're not legally allowed to do. See the quandary we've been having in Texas? This is the reason why I've been keep telling you guys. Everybody in jail in Texas is illegally there. This will be the People News. Bye.